Good morning, evening, afternoon, whenever we are. Brendan Corrigan, how are you?
Well, I like the way you cater for our international audience because I'm sure there are many listening on the Polynesian Islands or whatever they're called in Australia, all over the world to Bogotá Nights. It's attracting people from all four corners of the world. How has your week been? Have you still got construction going on at the house? I'm intrigued to know what you're doing. I thought you'd already your house kind of up to speed, or these are renovations.
This is the last part of kind of the, let's say that there's a pressing renovation. This is the last stage, bathrooms. So the ensuite bathroom's been more or less fixed with lots of Chilean copper, and I guess by the weekend or early next week we'll have retiled the main bathroom, put in all the new shower fittings and all that sort of thing, and ready to go. Very much on the last leg now.
I like the way you've used the plural there. Are you getting down and dirty with this as well?
Semi, yeah. I see my role more as a kind of hands-off designer sort of thing than the man doing the actual hard work, who, to be fair, is working hard and very, very reasonably. And what about yourself up in the north?
Well, all is good here, foreman Ollie Pritchard. I made a grand return to extras work after about a 4-year absence, after promising I would never do standard extras work again, TV extras, movie extras and things like that. Blog story to come on my experiences. I'm still recovering from having to get up at 1:30 a.m. on Monday morning to be picked up at 2:10 to be brought on set and to sit around. I kind of equate it to a hen lying on eggs lying on eggs that will never hatch. That's kind of extras work. Anyway, just seems like rather useless.
In the end, will a beautiful new show not be hatched?
Yeah, well, I have very little to do with it, and I won't get much money out of it. Anyway, let's move on. I'll have a blog story on that in the morning, guys, so stay tuned to Wrong Way Corrigan for that. But we're on police patrol, guys, on tonight's Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show. Yes, we're opening a file on La Policía Nacional de Colombia. That's Colombia's police force, in case you're wondering. Outside of sharing details of our own encounters, we want to hear about your dealings with the boys and girls who formerly wore green. Their shiny new uniforms are dark, dark blue, of course. Do you feel like your civil liberties have been violated when they randomly stop you on the street and ask you for ID, or worse still, frisk you? Have you ever been forced into paying a bribe? How have you found the process of reporting crime, if you bother at all, that is? Or do you think the police here are easygoing and a pleasure to deal with? Whatever your Colombian police perspective is, do get your messages into us right now. The live comment facility is open for business, and your messages will appear on the screen here below us. If you're watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet, the handle being @BogotAPost with the hashtag Bogotá Nights. This show is all about viewer interaction after all, so get your messages into us, guys. Well, we're on the beat with the police later, virtually. But as ever, it's our take on the week's big news stories first. And Ollie, as we are foreigners living in Colombia, obviously enough, stories of fellow non-Colombian nationals getting into bother here do grab our attention. The deportation of the German woman Rebecca Linda Marlene Sprösser, if my German pronunciation is right, this is a case in point, and it's been all over the news here. But why exactly was she kicked out? What did she do?
Well, it depends kind of who you want to believe. If you want to believe her, she's getting involved in a very much a nascent and important part of Colombian life. If you want to believe Migración Colombia, she's participating in events that threaten public law and order. So take your pick there.
Okay. So what exactly is the background story there? She arrived here, as a tourist or something a few months ago, just when the protests were kicking off. Is that right, or just shortly before that?
No, I think quite a bit before. Sorry, I've just got a slightly distracting light there.
Okay.
Slightly She turned up, I think, in March, if I remember correctly, so quite a while back, coming as a tourist, and mainly to learn salsa. And that was the sort of key thing. Oh, sorry, there's another thing she's accused of doing, which is she's accused of working under a tourist visa. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, as a tourist, she's allowed to go salsa dancing. As a tourist, or in fact, as any Colombian here, you have the same civil rights as Colombians. You don't necessarily have the same legal rights, you don't have the same political rights, but you do have the same civil rights. And one of those civil rights is the right to go around marching and protesting. However, you're not allowed to go and get involved in, let's say, vandalism or acts of public disorder, just as Colombians are not allowed to and face, sanctions, including prison, etc. And of course, you're not allowed to work if you're on a tourist visa. Now, she used to be a journalist, in a sort of previous life. And she thought that the situation happening in Cali, which, as we all know, got very spicy, kind of end of April, beginning of May. She said quite rightly, some of my journalism friends might be interested in some of this, and she sent on a few contacts, she put people in touch with other people, etc. Now, Migración Colombia is saying that she's overstepped a mark, that essentially she's working. It doesn't appear, as far as I can see, she hasn't published anything under her own name. She isn't retained by anybody. No one seems to be paying her for anything here. So it's hard to see how they can make that justification. And really, they've thrown the book at her, if we're being honest. It's one thing saying, okay, well, by the letter of the law, we can do this. That's all very nice and well. But to suddenly enforce something by the letter of the law when it's never been done before, it seems arbitrary, put simply.
Well, can I put this to you? That Migración did say in their original press release that they were guaranteeing and respecting the rights of the foreign citizens. So in this case, our friend Linda, I think she uses her name, and her safety was under threat, because there's even more to that as well. I think she'd made the decision to leave the country anyway, but she was waiting around, and you can probably tell us the reasons why she was waiting around.
Correct. So, as a result of being involved in the Cali protests and helping to make them kind of visible to the world, which a lot of people did, to be fair. I don't think no one is suggesting that she was unique in this, but certainly playing her part in bringing this to the attention of various media. And as happens in a city like Cali, this comes to the attention of people who would prefer that these things were not made public. And it's really not clear exactly who that is at this point. She had many death threats and so forth, and there was an attempt on her life. Her friend took the bullets for her. He passed away this afternoon. She wanted to stay in Colombia a few more days to check on his health, which seems very understandable. And she wanted to be there until the end, or to see what would happen to him, to hope for a miracle maybe. And that was denied to her. So there is an element of compassion to this. I think it's, to be honest, I think it's crass of Migración Colombia to say we're doing this for her own safety. There's an element of gaslighting to that, I think. There are other ways that her safety could be guaranteed. We'll come back to it.
Yeah. I was going to say, it also doesn't shed Colombia in a great light when they're saying, well, we sent her back to Europe to guarantee her safety, because basically we can't guarantee her safety in this country.
Yeah, exactly. What are you kind of throwing out there? If that's your message, that if you're saying to people, well, yeah, you've got the civil right to protest, but we won't protect you if men with guns come after you. Now, of course, there's the inevitable kind of, Twitter storm about how, she's being targeted by the authorities and blah, blah. I think absolutely she is being targeted in that respect. As per the people who made an attack on her life, we don't know who they were. As has been the case in so much of these protests, it's really not clear who the actors are in many cases.
But what about those? I've seen a few comments on Facebook, and of course it's far from the gospel on this, but some other foreigners saying, well, you know, she really shouldn't have got involved in this and being so vociferous or whatever, and obviously clearly taking sides. I mean, if you maybe want to be as impartial as you can be as a journalist, and of course she wasn't here working as a journalist anyway, as we've already said. But what about that argument that really she shouldn't have been kind of getting that politically involved? Okay, because we've all shared videos of the protest, but I guess we haven't been there with holding flags and with signs or whatever. We haven't been really involved in them. So what do you make of that argument, that she really should have just given it a wide berth?
Yeah, look, I've heard this many times, and it was a big theme in the protest season. You know, if we think back to late April, early May, this is a comment that comes up all the time, that people will wade in, and it's usually Americans, to be honest. They're almost always coming in and they say, oh, well, you know, we shouldn't get involved in politics in somebody else's country. We shouldn't tell them how to do things. And you kind of want to say, look, you know, I know being American, you can maybe have that history of having a government that historically has gone and told other people what to do in very, very recent history. But look, if you live in Colombia, and if you care about Colombia, if you've been here for a while, if you're, you know, part of the country, then absolutely, of course you have. Look, I would not bat an eyelid, Brendan, if you were in London, you know, on a march for, frankly, whatever cause. I would not bat an eyelid. I would not find it unusual. I wouldn't find it strange. I wonder sometimes what these people say. What they would say to people who perhaps live in Saudi Arabia. Would you say, oh, well, you know, it's their country, we have to accept what, you know, how women are treated here? Surely you've got the right to say, hang on, I think this is a bit crazy. I think this is, you know, something that we'd like to stop. Again, if a Colombian was living in the United States and was protesting against, let's say, gun regulation, or gun freedom, should we say, I think that would be an entirely reasonable thing for them to do. So I don't really buy that argument. And remember as well, Brendan, another thing that's super important here is it doesn't really matter what side you take in politics. The point is, if you're joining in Colombian politics, you're agreeing with a lot of Colombians. You're disagreeing with a lot of Colombians, but you're also agreeing with a lot of Colombians, just that those two groups of Colombians have different views on the thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I mean, you could say how far do you want to take this? Like Zach Morris, one of our #1 fans to Bogotá Nights, but this famous influencer who got his citizenship from Duque back in 2018, if I'm correct. But like, he had a sign up on his social media when the protests started off, you know, saying they are killing us from the safety of wherever he was in the US or Spain. But I mean, again, that's a big political statement. And very much taking side of the protesters, who will be seen again anti-establishment. But I'm sure his citizenship hasn't been revoked.
Right. Anyway. And, you know, and there's a difference. You know, they've kind of got this German woman, Sprösser, on a bit of a technicality. And look, I would say that I think Zach and also Dominic Wolf, I think they're you know, it could maybe be seen as a bit cynical in the way that they've appropriated it. But certainly that would be my problem with it, the perceived cynicality of it. It wouldn't be the fact that they were doing it.
Okay. Well, I guess bottom line anyway for Linda, the German, in this is that she will not be able to return to this country. Is it for 10 years now?
Correct.
After that, you have to apply for a visa just to enter. So, yeah, unlikely she'd ever set foot in the country again, unless, I'm thinking, if we got the likes of Petro elected president next year, like, he might make it a kind of a point to revoke that.
I'd imagine there'd be more pressing concerns.
Well, you never know. Look, citizenship, anything can happen. So, look, There is a kind of, there's a migration theme to this, a migration theme tonight, but we just want to mention what's happening up in Antioquia, and coastal Antioquia in the Caribbean, because Necoclí, if I'm pronouncing that correct, which I don't think I am, but near Turbo, and I know, Necoclí, I know Turbo quite well, and I know Turbo used to be a departing point as well for many migrants, Haitians and Cubans, as a back way into the United States. And apparently now there's anything up to 10,000 in that town at the moment waiting, because of the problems in Haiti, the problems in Cuba, and because of the COVID problems in general, and borders just being reopened, and they've slowly made their way there to make the passage to Panama and onwards through and hopefully what they're hoping anyway, to get to the land of hope and glory, the United States. But it seems like a bit of a mess for that town. We're not talking rich Colombia there, not at all.
No, we're really not. Necoclí, I think, most famous for most Colombians for being the birthplace of Cuadrado, the footballer, Juan Guillermo Cuadrado. Yes, it's an absolutely insane situation. I think, we've talked before about the way that, many Colombian border towns with Venezuela are not set up to deal with mass immigration at short notice. And that's definitely even more true of somewhere like coastal Antioquia. It's a massive humanitarian disaster. I mean, we've got possible inclement weather on the way in the Caribbean. It's around this time of year that hurricanes will start coming in. And, if anything bad happens, if we get flooding, if we get extreme storms or anything like that, then there's absolutely no way that hospitals will be able to cope with that. There's no way that people will be able to put up with it. And again, with very limited numbers of boats going to Panama, these people aren't going anywhere soon.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens over the coming days, because I know it's kind of something that's just been brought to the attention. It's been international media as well, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of focus there to see what happens there. Just people are getting in with their comments. As we said, we always like to hear from you guys. It's your comments that make this show roll nicely along. Thanks to Howie Hines. I love alliteration in names. Listening in, watching in from Canada. We like that. Cheers, Howie. Have you lived in Colombia? Have you visited here? Have you dealt with the police? We're going to be talking about that in the second half of the show. That's our big topic today, dealing with the Colombian police. Jose Alfredo Franco Leon, in our country, policies are in to contradiction and paradox era we all are living. I guess we could probably say that about every country in the world. We're all kind of wondering what the hell we're going through right now in this world. Angela's been in with a comment. Give me a second to get over that one. But Ollie, you also, just kind of moving on from this, you highlighted when we were talking yesterday, planning this show, our defence minister, our new defence minister, Diego Moreno, was on a bit of a rant on Twitter of late.
Yeah, well, on Twitter, he also did an interview, I think, with Blue Radio, where he's just, let rip on a number of subjects. So he's been covering a lot of ground. I suppose, obviously it's a high-profile office at the best of times, especially at the moment. So he's accusing local alcaldías, as well as Claudia Lopez herself, of allowing Portal de Americas, to become a little station of anarchy in the middle of Bogotá, which is quite dramatic language. Reminds me a bit of Trump, talking about Portland, of course, last year. He's saying that the peace process is letting too many FARC members go. And he's also announcing that there's been sort of some, again, the Ministry of Defence are really fond of doing this. They love to say, hey, we've caught an ALN person and he was definitely planning something, but we can't show you any of the proof or any of the evidence. Which, the more that we hear that, the less we trust it, I think.
Of course. So is Diego Molano a bit of a Donald Rumsfeld of Colombia? Would that be one way of putting it?
I think that would be overstating him a little bit too far, but certainly he's keen to put his own point of view across. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Now, apologies, I didn't group these stories terribly well, but there is another kind of immigration, traveling related story. But Colombians traveling to Spain have been in a bit of bother. And now, can they get into the country? What's the latest with that?
Well, if you're going to Spain and you're Colombian, you'd better have a good reason. Well, actually, to be fair, I don't think it is if you're Colombian, but if you're not from the EU and a few other sort of associated countries, mainly in Schengen, it's not happening. They're too worried about the number of forged COVID tests coming out of Colombia. So basically, as it turns out, the Spanish migration authorities and the public health authorities got a little bit suspicious at the number of Colombians that had negative tests but were testing positive on arrival. And so they kind of originally, apparently, they put it down to thinking that there probably wasn't decent healthcare in Colombia and that the doctors were making mistakes or not testing correctly. But on further investigation, they found that just a lot of them had been forged, were fake, etc., 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 which has prompted much consternation within Colombia. But the long and the short of it is basically if your visa on arrival in Spain and you're Colombian, it's not happening.
It also kind of prompted a bit of soul searching, as you said. They were looking in the mirror here. The Blue Radio, is it like are we a bunch of cheaters and whatever? Was that a trend on Blue Radio? They had a debate about it. I guess we had, was it Enrique Peñalosa? I don't want to get the name wrong here, but wasn't it one politician who also was it forged or didn't do their thesis or something like that? We've had a few high-profile cases, haven't we?
I have a fair bit of corruptions, all over the place, as we know. Which, to be fair, it is in many places. I mean, I don't think Colombia is unique in that. I have a bit of sympathy with Enrique Peñalosa, not too much, but a little bit of sympathy. Part of his issue was the Ministry of Education recognising things, and frankly, the Ministry of Education are awful at recognising bits of paper from other countries. So I do have a little bit of sympathy. I've got a friend, an American friend, who has Latin on his official degree from the United States, and because there's Latin on it, he needs an official Latin translator to make his degree legal. And of course, official Latin translators, Latin Spanish, not that easy to find in Colombia. You just think to yourself, absolute nonsense.
Yeah, madness. By the way, Angela, thanks for your comment on the police. We're going to get to that in the second half of the show. Share with us your police stories, be they good, bad, or indifferent. Are you kind of on the positive side with the police here? You think they've got a tough job to do, they're getting a lot of criticism and they do it well? Or do you think, no, don't just change the uniforms, they need a complete root and branch reform? And give us your stories as to why. Send them our way. We'll get to those in the second half of the show. Richard Stoller, our resident historian, we'll call him resident, virtually resident. He's saying that Ollie makes the key point. Well, that makes a difference. Well done, Ollie, for making the key point. But yeah, there's nothing to do with Colombia. But Colombia say everything like the Monty Python, news for givens, and they are the givens. Bit harsh there. Come on, let's not generalize. But Ollie, have you got your tickets for El Campín next Tuesday? I think it is. Nacional coming to town to play Santa Fe, and we can now have 50% capacity in the stadium because we're further easing the restrictions on the coronavirus containment measures. So I'm sure you've got your tickets.
And if one wants to be particularly facetious, one could point out that for many Colombian league matches, being limited to 50% capacity really isn't going to be a problem.
It actually puts them under pressure to get 50% in.
Yeah, I was about to say. I went once to a junior match in Barranquilla, and I can't even remember. They were playing somebody like Jaguares or Pasto or somebody like that. And I swear to God, in a stadium of, 40 or 50,000, there must have been barely a couple of thousand people there. And I've never seen anywhere so empty. Like, so conspicuously empty. But Nacional Santa Fe, you'd expect a decent crowd, especially after so long. I'm sure it will be at the 50% or slightly over.
It should be. Yeah. Whisper it. But of course, outside of football, it's events, so theatres, concerts, if we have any coming up. And well, they mentioned discos, but I mean, I think there's been discos operating the last few weeks. There have been around.
Yeah, I don't get that. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I have a friend who recently rented a place right next to Teatron, and she certainly reports not having been able to sleep Thursdays through to Saturdays. So.
I usually get that most weekends. The vaccines rolling on as well. We're now I think it's 25 to 29-year-olds are now eligible to get their jabs. So that's moving along. The Moderna vaccine has made its long-awaited arrival as well. This is using that mRNA technology to top of the range kind of vaccine. I think about 1 million and something of those arrived. I think there's up to 10 million that they've already bought and secured. So they'll be coming in drips and drabs, I guess, over the next few weeks. And about, in total, the other day, almost 12 million have got, fully vaccinated at this stage. Although there is news that, of worrying, or variants of concern, I guess is the phrase to use. Right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, Delta, of course, is the big one here. Which will be problematic if it takes hold properly in Colombia because of its capacity to spread quickly, which is really the key problem here, rather than the damage it can do under perfect circumstances. But I think it's odd that Colombia's made almost no attempt to stop the third wave, and yet it's in retreat anyway. We're down to 300 deaths a day, far from ideal, but given that we're currently under basically no attempt to stop it, I mean, I suppose, bizarrely, that has to be seen as progress.
Well, you could almost kind of call it personal responsibility now. Like, the country's obviously clearly not back to normal in terms of education anyway. You're still working from home. Schools are at best, I guess, not even 50% from what I can see. The colleges around me, maybe at like 30% or something capacity. And I know a few parents who have just said, no, we're not going to send back our little Camilo this year. We'll wait until 2022. So I've spoken to a few parents in the barrio here, and they're doing that. But anyway, we'll jump on to the Olympics. The high jump or whatever we want to do, moving on there. It's a terrible attempt there, a bit of a pun. But it hasn't been fantastic, has it, for the Colombians thus far? But there's a bit of excitement now gathering around Medellin, and the country in general for Mariana Pajon, because we're looking at, she's obviously, we mentioned her last week, going for gold yet again. And it's been a solid start for her. I think, is it in the early hours of the morning? We'll have news of that, if she's going to get a medal.
Yeah, I mean, she's going for that triple gold medal, with her controversial French-born husband, I mean, it's all looking good.
You're just jealous, Ollie.
I am slightly. I find the whole furore over Guyard a little bit weird, frankly. Nobody sort of laid into, for example, Enrique Peñalosa, who was born in Washington, or various other Colombian figures like
that. You have to explain that. Explain that a little bit. Why is there a bit of furore over this?
Maria Pajon's husband, Guyard, I think he's called, he was born in France, although he does have Colombian nationality. And so there's a bit of stick, there's a sort of born in Colombia BMX rider kind of put an angry Facebook post up, or Twitter post, or Instagram, I can't remember, saying, oh, it's unfair, he's been selected because he's Mariana Pajon's husband and not because he's the best person on merit, blah, blah, blah. But it turns out, once one looks at the data on qualifying points, actually he's got more qualifying points than the next person in line. So there you go.
Okay, fair enough. Anything else to watch out in the Olympics? I have to confess, Ollie, I haven't really got into it. I guess it's the hour, the time. Like you have to really be dedicated if you want to watch anything in the Olympics from this side of the world. And yeah, it's never really. I kind of keep an eye on the headlines, but nothing's really excited me thus far. But the track and field events are kind of getting underway soon enough, so we should have Catherine Ebergwen and all that kind of stuff. So I might get more into it.
Speed skating. I mean, Colombia regularly rack up massive returns on golds in speed skating world championships. So let's see if they can do it at the Olympics.
Okay. Anything else on sport that we need to mention? I don't think so. It's been kind of quiet, really, outside of the Olympics, which it's not that big of a deal, is it? Really? I'll indulge for a second. How are Team GB getting on?
I think we're doing okay. We won a lot of medals in swimming, weirdly. Kind of think of the Australians there. There's been a lot of debate among friends here, including Irish friends, about whether it should be called Team GB, Team Britain, or Team GB and Northern Ireland. Nonetheless, it's been pointed out that a lot of the Colombian commentators are just referring to them as Inglaterra.
Who cares about Scotland and Wales?
Which is in no way annoying to the Scots, the Welsh, or the Northern Irish competitors, but there you go.
Indeed, and just to quickly point out before we go down this rabbit hole, that of course people born in Northern Ireland can choose to compete for either Team Ireland or Team GB. They have a choice. Anyway, policing in Colombia, and we've already got a few anecdotes in from our regular viewers, listeners, whatever they're doing. I'm sure they're not sitting down watching us. I think it's that exciting to sit down and watch two heads moving around. If I was on the other end of the screen, so to put it, I'd be, I don't know, preparing my breakfast for the morning while listening. So I'll call them listeners. But Angela's got her stories. Will we start with those so it gets the ball rolling, or have you got an anecdote you want to tell, Ollie, or do you want to read out the comment?
I'm going to do I'll go first very briefly with a slightly positive police anecdote. I was once riding my bicycle outside of Bogotá on the highway on the hard shoulder, got a flat, and not a single bus would stop me to take me into Bogotá. Would stop and take me on into Bogotá. So I was getting quite despondent, thinking, I'm going to have to walk like 30 kilometers back into Bogotá now. This is not ideal. And the police just picked me up, put me on the back of their van, took me to Cheer, took me to a bike shop. Waited for me to, because I didn't have a spare and I didn't have a puncture repair kit. I know I was being an absolute donut. And they didn't have to do this at all. And then drove back out onto the highway, drove as far along as they could until they realized we're kind of in traffic a little bit by this point. And they said, oh, that's our boss up there. And there was indeed another police car. They said, he can't see you doing this, so you're going to have to jump off and cycle now again. So I jumped off and cycled. But they really saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of worry. So that was one positive.
Okay. Well, I did mention a few weeks ago when we were kind of talking about friendly Colombia, but I'll repeat it. On a night when, there was one or two drinks consumed at one of those rare occasions that happens once in a blue moon. And, somebody give me a knock in the mouth and managed to knock out one of my false tooth here, which I've did since I was 14. Anyway, this could go on all night if I go into all the details of it. But anyway, so there was blood from my mouth and a missing tooth, although I had the false tooth in my hand. But the police saw this, and obviously they were slightly concerned. They brought me around to a few clinics, which of course was beyond the call of duty, really. None of them would let me in because they didn't have insurance at the time. And it wasn't as bad as I think as they thought it was, because they just, oh no, he's lost his tooth. But no, it's a false tooth anyway. But I just obviously need to get it fixed back in, which did cost a bit of money. But yeah, like, you know, to bring me around to all these clinics, fair play to them, I thought, for that. I mean, they could have just left me there. And of course, we've said this before, we always kind of speak maybe perhaps from a white privilege here. Had I been a Colombian and that had happened, I'm sure they would have just left me on the street. So this kind of, you know, badly speaking Spanish badly foreigner up around the Portal Norte, they're probably going, God, this man, where the hell did he come out of? We probably need for his own safety to bring him to a clinic or whatever. But there you go. Angela has 3 police stories. So quickly, traffic jam on Autopista Norte. God, it's all happening around the Autopista Norte. Very softly bumped into the back of a police motorbike. How softly? I want to get a neutral perspective on this. He stopped us, claimed we had scratched his bike when our bumper simply kissed his wheels rubber. Pretended we paid to fix his bike. Okay. We did not give a threat to call insurance, that whole thing. Police officer returned our documents and said bye. Well, there you go, Angela, standing your ground. And of course, this brings into the whole world of bribes as well, Ollie.
I would like to point out at this conjuncture, if anyone happens to be watching from a legal standpoint, that we neither condone the offering of nor taking off, accepting of bribes. And we're certainly not suggesting that bribes are something that the Colombian police are likely to do, ask for, or take in. Having said that...
This program was brought to you by Policía Nacional de Colombia.
I will say, I expect to hear quite a lot of stories where people say the opposite, but we are, of course, not responsible for their views.
Yeah, of course, we do have a radio station, Radio Policía, isn't it? What's it called? But like the police radio station. And it seems quite popular. Now, it seems to have nothing to do with the police. Like, they just play all the normal Colombian music that you'd expect them to play. But I hear it on in a lot of tiendas, like, you know, vegetable, fruit and veg shops and things like that. They have it on. Richard, about the police. Well, yes, we are holding it for the police. In peaceable places, the police are wonderful. Okay, but it's in violent or conflicted places that make them bad. And I assume it's because that they're in a bad mood because they were posted to such places. I guess. So maybe then I should become a police officer, because I tend to find out, you know, or find these crappy places, like send me off to Turbo or to, I don't know, Buenaventura, and I'm kind of like a pig in muck.
Well, I mean, I would say I think Richard has got a good point there. And I think not. I mean, look, I've heard stories of, you know, bad policing all over the shop. But equally, I think he's probably correct in that most of the stories I hear about bad policing tend to correlate with the sort of places where it's probably not easy to be a police officer. So I think, you know, there definitely is an element of that. And again, you were talking earlier about the whole thing about, you know, white privilege. Another good experience I had was, you know, in our very local park, there was a guy with a dog that he made no attempt to control, big, potentially dangerous dog. And, you know, a couple of neighbours had complained about this. I was the first one to go and ask a police officer. And the police officer duly trotted down, went to the guy's house, had a word, and quite calmly said, look, I'm being very civil about this, but you're on our records now. And if this happens again, we'll be coming back, and we won't be so civil about it because I'll come back with animal protection and bosses and the like. Which I thought was pretty good policing. You're giving somebody a shot across the bows, you're warning them that they're breaking the law, but you're also not fining them immediately. So they've had fair warning, they know what to do. So I thought that was fairly reasonable. But again, it's a relatively affluent part of the world. The police probably don't get, you know, treated badly by civilians around them. They're probably more receptive to treating. I think what's always dangerous is when you get into this situation where the police are seen as the enemy rather than protectors of the people. And obviously in a lot of Colombia, that's exactly how they are seen. You know, they're almost like an occupying force in some respects.
Yeah, well, I know these were exceptional times, but I certainly saw that last September just at the Kai station now, which is just behind me, 2 blocks away, the Verbinal Kai station, where it was very much trench warfare almost between the protesters or delinquents, whatever you want to call them, and the police officers. But that is like the point here in Bogota. I've largely had positive experiences with the police. Like they've been taxis for me when really they shouldn't have been, and of course it's when one or two drinks were consumed. But talking then in Santa Marta, I had an incident with the police with a fellow Irishman where we were basically overcharged in a tienda, and we were standing our ground saying, this is what you told us the price was. I forget exactly what the overcharging was. I think it was that he told us a price, and then when it came to paying, he said, "Oh well, because you were drinking cold beers, they were more expensive than warm." It's like, warm beer in Santa Marta, get out of here. So yeah, we had this argument. The police came along, and of course the police took his side and then brought us back to the station, and they gave us fines. But then we were told by somebody else, I think maybe back at the hostel or somebody else told us, "So go to this office in the morning." I don't know if it's the Defensor del Pueblo or whatever, and appeal it. So we went in and did all that. And anyway, long story short, because this is important, you can go on the police website or some website and put in your details to find if you're mentioned, if you're on the record. And thankfully, I'm not on police records here or anything like it. But that's actually good, because we were talking about this as well, how digitalized a lot of the police services are here. Now that can work in your favor and it can work against you.
I actually think the Policía Nacional de Colombia and the Fiscalía, who are kind of slightly related, I think they're pretty advanced in that sort of respect. It's very easy to make a denuncia, almost worryingly easy, to be honest. But that's a really positive thing. Again, it's one of these things that, on paper it's fantastic. It's a fantastic tool against corruption. In reality, it's not. It doesn't quite work in the way it's intended to. But yeah, I've always been impressed by that. That from the comfort of your own home, you can easily enough make a denuncia, and you can check your own records. You can watch the progress of it. I think that's a really positive thing. And I'm to be honest, I'm not au fait with modern policing in England, but I don't think we're quite at that level of service.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was just reading at one of Angela's three main stories there. So one of them was about that word there, bribing, which of course we can't say if it happens or not, but this is Angela's story of, well, she thinks they may have been looking for a bribe, but it didn't happen in the end. And what it turned out is that these particular policemen were indeed corrupt. I don't know where you got that information that they were corrupt, but that wouldn't surprise me. But Ethan makes the comment about policing in poorer neighborhoods. As you know, I socialize in Barrio Santandercito, which is a Strato Dos, and in this area anyway will be like working class. There's a love-hate. Well, love-hate is a bit of a strong way to put it, but there's a strange relationship. The police have their favorites. They seem to and this would be all involved drinking and whatever else. But they would have their favorite little tiendas, and they would even go in, and all is fine. But then they seem to kind of pick on particular people, I find. So some people seem to get on okay with them, and then others it doesn't. It's a weird relationship. I kind of struggle to know what's going on, but it's really nothing like community policing. It's kind of what you'd call it.
Yeah, and I find it absolutely fascinating. It's interesting you say love-hate relationship. I find it fascinating that, almost everyone I speak to, whether or not they're strongly anti-police or not, they almost always will say something at least along the lines of, oh, well, they're useless. Some people will say they're corrupt and they're violent and, agents of the state and all this, and some people won't. But everyone pretty much has agreed that they don't do their jobs very well. Yet everybody goes to them. When they have a problem, they go to the police. When when there's an issue, they shout for the police. When a robber is captured, people shout for the police and, get the police in here to make sure he's captured properly and all this sort of thing. And I find that quite bizarre that people still kind of do, retain trust for police. And I also find it amazing just how easily police walk around. Given that we saw a massive outburst of rage against the police less than a year ago, coppers still walk around, in ones or twos, unarmed, quite freely.
Oh yeah, like after the attack on the Verban Al-Kai here, for maybe about a week, 10 days, there was no sign of the police in the neighborhood. Really, they just decided let's make ourselves invisible. But then they gradually came back, and like I knew a few of the lads who were involved in that protest on the front line. Let's put it that way, La Primera Linea, but a very different Primera Linea, and. The police now are walking by them in the barrio. It's like they have the blowout. Maybe it's like Colombian society in many ways. Like, you can get into an argument here easily, but then the next day they forget about it and, just move on. Whereas perhaps our cultures, we hold a grudge for ever and ever and ever and don't let go. But yeah, it's kind of a strange dynamic going on there. Ali, you mentioned the kind of like instruments of the state or whatever, and you find the structure of the police here coming from the UK rather strange, because they're effectively like a tool of the government and not necessarily the state. So if the government changes, they could, I guess, influence the police rather easily, whereas in the UK it's a completely different setup.
Well, I think in most countries, I don't think there's many places in the world where the government, well, actually maybe there are, but certainly there's a certain profile to a country where the government has a direct hand. And just to be clear to people who maybe don't know how the setup is, the Colombian police, strangely, are not under the Justice Ministry, but they're under the Defense Ministry. So they're run by the Minister of Defense. And when I say run by, literally the chain of command goes through the Minister of Defense right up to President. And it's a fully national police. There's no kind of state police. So people often talk about Maybog, the Policía of Bogotá, but that's extremely misleading. Saying that they're the police of Bogotá is like saying that a branch of Juan Valdez is the Juan Valdez of Candelaria. It's an odd pronunciation. It's not separate in any meaningful way. It doesn't have any sort of autonomy. So literally the person handing out the orders is Diego Milano. And even he can be superseded by Duque. If Duque wants to turn up tomorrow and say to the police, look, I want you just to do something weird, then they'll follow his order. Or they'll say, look, for moral reasons, I can't follow your order. I'm resigning from the police service, of course. That's a possibility. But I find that really bizarre because, in most countries, it's not uncommon that politicians can sack police commissioners, but they certainly can't just appoint the next one. And they certainly can't give them influence. They can sack them, but they can't tell them what to do, which is a separate thing.
Yeah, well, Ireland, I guess, maybe is kind of betwixt and between them, because it's the Minister for Justice who would be in charge of the police force on Garda Síochána. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road, but I'm not 100% sure exactly how they are run and what the power structure is there. The one thing I mentioned in our introduction talking about this, because still to me it's something I find a bit odd, and I don't feel comfortable with it, even though it's minor on the great scheme of things. But when they stop you on the street and ask for your cedula, I'm like, no, I feel like saying no. I didn't do anything. Don't look for my cedula. And actually, I remember I was with a Spanish journalist who worked for El Tiempo here years back, and we were around La Macarena, and this happened. And she got very prickly with them, kind of going, why are you doing this? Even though she was working here and she probably knew that they were allowed to do it by law, but she just didn't like it. I guess that's our European kind of civil liberties things. You have to have a good reason and have a court order or whatever to. Oh yeah. These
trivial Northern European things like innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. Yeah, no. Let's just flippantly discard
That's my
that.
hard line coming down here. That's what I say. Bring it in.
No, yeah, I mean, I find it massively uncomfortable. I find it uncomfortable, I'll be honest, when I'm in a shop. And I do deliberately avoid these shops as much as I can. But it irritates me to no end if I'm in a shop and they say, "Oh, can we see your receipt?" So I'm leaving. And I'm like, "What, do you think I'm a criminal?" Like, I find it really irritating to have that assumption of wrongdoing. You know, it's one thing if they say, "Okay, you've been acting in an unusual way, or you did this or that or the other. We've got reason to suspect you." I'd say, "Okay, that's absolutely fine," and I might, you know, it's entirely possible that I had been acting in an unusual way. I often do, but. Yeah, I don't like that. You know, if somebody had stopped me and they said, "Look, you know, a guy with a big ginger beard and long blonde hair on a bicycle just committed a crime. You know, we'd like to look at your bag and your papers." I'd say, "Yep, okay, that's eminently reasonable. I can see why you would be thinking I could be a suspect in this." But just, yeah, a random take on it. I'm not a fan. I'm really not a fan. It's only happened to me twice, that the requisition of papers. Both times I've happened to be with American, Colombian dual nationality citizens, and that's particularly painful.
Okay. Because have you ever been frisked then? Because it's happened to me in the barrios, because I'm with, you know, some of the local lads, and the police come along, they're okay, up against the wall, lads. And of course, it's always just the guys they frisk, because, you know, women never commit crimes. But obviously they'd have to have a woman police officer there, which I'm sure they did. But yeah, like I've been frisked on the street as well sometimes, which also, like, you know, whatever about asking for the sentence, it's like, hold on here. But there's a part of me like, well, frisk me, you're not going to find anything anyway. And then when they find out when I'm a foreigner, they're like, "Oh, you're not from here." And they're like, "No, I'm not." And then they kind of, but again, that's that white privilege.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of things there. And by the way, if anybody's watching who's not sure about the law, yes, they can do it. But also, if you don't have your cedula on you, I'm thinking about, for example, when I go running in the morning, you're perfectly within your rights to say, "I'll take you to my house," or escort me to my house, and I'll show you that I have a cedula. It's
See,
not.
Angela's comment, story 4. They asked
Yes,
for my
exactly.
cedula once, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Just check the info,
Um,
because they do have it on the system anyway, so they'll be able to put in the number.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
nowadays, yeah.
absolutely. And I've played silly buggers before with policemen over this, and they've just walked off. I remember once I was walking along Trece or Quince, I can't remember, and they just stopped me and said, "Oh, you know, can we see your cedula?" And I went, "Do you have a good reason?" Um, yeah, I just felt in a cantankerous mood. And so, you know, we argued at cross purposes for a while, and then they just gave up and walked off. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I've never really seen what the point is of randomly asking for cedulas. As Angela says, random requisition, probably quite useless. It's one thing when you think somebody might be operating in an area. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, for example, I've been traveling between departments and in hot zones before, and it's not at all unusual that the bus or jeep or 4x4 or whatever you're traveling in will get stopped at a police checkpoint. They take everybody in their vehicle's cedula, they check them against the database. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, they want to know, you know, where people are traveling and stuff like that. I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
Well,
try that one in Venezuela as well, because in fairness, anytime that's happened to me on a bus, and when they see it's a foreign cedula, they usually just hand it straight back to me, whereas they take all the Colombian ones and, as you say, cross-check them or whatever. On Venezuela, it's the complete opposite. The local cedulas, they don't care, and then when they see a foreigner, "Get off the bus, where's your bag?" and be prepared. Well, I've never actually had to hand over money, but it's been a quite intense experience. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But I was, yeah, on the, something came into my head now, and it's gone out of my head about the cedulas. Anyway, it might come back to me in a second, because, well, it's obviously not important. God damn it. Anyway, Ollie, we're coming close to time, and I know you want to also mention the kind of bad boys, what they're going to do when they come for you. The the ESMAD, which of course is also part of the police. For how much longer, though? There's a lot of talk that they'll be disbanded, or at least a new kind of.
Well, yeah. Look, if they do get disbanded, they'll immediately be brought back under a different name. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there can't be many countries in the world that don't have riot police. But some of the hardware these guys turn up. They're affectionately or warily nicknamed Robocops. And there's reason for that. I mean, they turn up in full military-style body armor. We're not talking about shields and long batons. We're talking about the full real stuff, the tear gas and stun grenades going off all over the place. As we know, that can be lethal. And they've just got an unfortunate habit of whenever they turn up. I mean, look, we've seen recently in demonstrations, up into and including last week, pretty much the story is written before it takes place. Everything's fine. People are getting along. They're shouting, they're dancing, they're drumming, they're laughing. ESMAD turn up. People immediately throw bricks and stuff at them. ESMAD take that as an excuse to go in as heavy-handed as possible. And, for anyone who's not seen Colombian riot police, they turn up in what can only really be described as armoured personnel carriers, like something you would see on a battlefield, with a water cannon and with really heavy-duty anti-personnel stuff. Non-lethal, or so they say. As we know, it cost a protester his life last year, and there's been incidents in Cali this year.
Yeah, non-lethal if used correctly, I guess would be the way to put that.
Like so much, Brendan, it's great on paper.
Indeed. Now, you're going to say about arriving in these armoured vehicles. Of course, I did live in Belfast for a year and a half, so I was kind of used to seeing the police arrive in armoured vehicles. So it doesn't surprise me that much, I guess. But I did see the ESMAD kind of behave well up here in Porto del Norte a few weeks ago when it looked like it could get heated, and everybody just seemed to find, okay, let's calm down, deep breaths, and the mayor's kind of, what are they called? You have a name for them? The orange jacket. Gestores de Convivencia Social Pública. Yeah, so they kind of got involved as well, and eventually the ESMAD retreated, and just the normal police were there, and that seemed to calm everybody down. There were a few gestures by the protesters at the ESMAD as they retreated, which, obviously the ESMAD are meant to be the professionals here, so they shouldn't react like
look, they've got all the. This is the thing, I think. Look, no one's doubting that they have Molotov cocktails and bricks and whatnot thrown at them. No one's doubting that. But also, they do make this situation for themselves in a certain respect. And it's also fair to say that, if you turn up ready for conflict, you're going to find conflict. That's how the world works. They act. There's no modern policing to this. They have all the tact of an elephant in a ballroom. They just have. There's no real interest in kind of gentle policing or managing the situation.
Yeah, you could have kept it more realistic and said Brendan in a ballroom, because an elephant probably has more elegance than me. I remember what I was going to say, and I know we've got to go, but when you were saying you refused to hand over the cedula, with the new Código de Policía that came in 5 years ago, and there's a good story on Blue Radio about what the top crimes are. But that one of the big things that people were worried about was this idea of not following police direction. Well, how do you define that? That's open to a lot of interpretation. So you could have been done for not following police orders. Anyway, our producer's frantically writing to us saying it's his bedtime. And it is our bedtime here almost as well. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your comments. We'll do it all again, hoy en ocho, this day next week. Until then, which will be August. Goodness me, where's the year going? Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.